For decades, the fashion world worshipped at the feet of Amancio Ortega, the man who turned a tiny Spanish workshop into the global fast fashion empire Zara. His fortune soared into the tens of billions, and yet, unlike other moguls, Ortega seemed almost invisible. No public speeches, no flashy social media, no Hollywood friends. In fact, for years, most Spaniards couldn't even recognize his face. But behind that quiet exterior lay a set of ruthless business moves, secret personal habits, and a tightly guarded private life that fueled Zara's meteoric rise and sparked whispers about just how far Ortega was willing to go to dominate the industry. From the very beginning, Ortega mastered the art of secrecy. While other CEOs chased headlines, he avoided interviews entirely. Reporters who tried to profile him ran into walls of silence. Rumors swirled. Did he have a temper behind closed doors? Was he quietly pulling political strings in Spain to protect his empire? And why did he suddenly start stepping away from the spotlight at the height of his power? One insider claimed that Ortega's entire philosophy was built on speed and control, not just in manufacturing clothes, but in controlling his public image, his family, and even the perception of his wealth. He didn't just want Zara to be fast. He wanted every move from factory floor to boardroom to be invisible until it hit the market, leaving competitors scrambling. The Zara system became legendary. New designs in stores in weeks, ruthless elimination of anything that didn't sell, and a corporate culture so secretive that employees were told never to speak to the press. While shoppers saw cheap, trendy clothes, critics began pointing out the hidden costs, allegations of exploitative labor in supplier factories, environmental damage, and an endless cycle of consumption. Through it all, Ortega never once sat down for a television interview to defend himself, never once delivered a speech to shareholders, never once appeared at flashy product launches. The man was a ghost, and that ghost was worth more than almost anyone alive. And then came the whispers that Ortega's empire might be changing, and not by choice. As his fortune faced fluctuations, questions began to emerge. Was the Zara model too dependent on speed in an era of sustainability? Could his famously private style of leadership survive in a hyper-transparent age? And was his gradual retreat from public life the sign of a man at peace, or a man hiding from something? They once stood at the very top, but what happened next? Join the Hidden Billionaires to uncover their story. Long before he became the secretive titan of fashion, Amancio Ortega Gaona was just a boy in a small town in northwest Spain, staring through the shop windows he could never afford to enter. Born in 1936-inch, the fishing town of Bustongo de Arbs, Leon, his earliest memories were marked not by luxury but by hardship. His father was a railway worker, his mother a housemaid, and the family lived modestly, some would say on the edge of poverty. One of the defining moments of Ortega's childhood came at the age of 13. Walking home with his mother from her employer's house, he overheard a shopkeeper telling her they couldn't give her credit for groceries anymore. The shame in her voice and the quiet way she accepted it cut deep. Ortega would later say nothing about this in public, but those close to him insist that day forged his obsession with financial independence and with never being at someone else's mercy again. School was brief. At 14, Ortega dropped out to work as a shop assistant in a local shirtmaker's store called Gala. It was here that he discovered two things. First, that he had a natural instinct for how clothes were made and sold. Second, that he couldn't stand inefficiency. He watched customers request styles that didn't exist and saw weeks pass before the store could deliver anything close. He wondered, why wait? Why not make what people want right now? His teenage years were a crash course in retail. Ortega moved on to work at La Maja, a clothing shop in A Coruña, where he met seamstresses, tailors, and suppliers. He learned the business from the inside, not in a classroom, but on the shop floor with a needle, fabric, and endless curiosity. He wasn't content to just sell clothes. He wanted to understand how demand could create supply, not the other way around. By the late 1952nd, Ortega had begun sewing his own dressing gowns and lingerie at home with the help of his siblings and future first wife, Rosala Mera. They sold their creations to local shops, delivering the orders themselves. Every peseta they earned went back into buying more fabric, more thread, more tools. The work was relentless. Late nights cutting patterns, early mornings delivering parcels, but the orders kept coming. Ortega had stumbled onto the formula that would one day change global fashion, make it fast, make it affordable, and give people exactly what they want the moment they want it. The 1962nd and early 72nd brought both expansion and personal transformation. Ortega formalized his operation, hiring seamstresses and moving production out of his home into a small workshop. By 1975, he and Rosala were ready for a bold step, opening their first retail store. They called it Zara. The choice was almost accidental. Their preferred name, Zorba, was already taken, so they improvised. The name meant little then, but it would soon stand for an empire. This period also revealed Ortega's defining traits: intense privacy, relentless focus, and an aversion to waste. He rarely spoke to outsiders about his business, even friends. He was known to walk factory floors unannounced, inspecting seams and fabrics himself, and unlike many businessmen, he showed no desire to flaunt his wealth, perhaps because he had known the humiliation of having none. By the time the first Zara store opened its doors, Ortega had already set the DNA of his future empire: local production for lightning, fast turnaround, obsessive attention to customer demand, and a leader who preferred to operate from the shadows. But what he didn't know was that these very traits, his speed, his secrecy, his resistance to public scrutiny, would one day both make him the richest man in Europe and leave him exposed when the world demanded answers. For years, Amancio Ortega had been the phantom king of fast fashion, admired by investors, envied by competitors, and almost invisible to the public eye. But even ghosts can't hide forever. By the late 2002, the very secrecy that had protected him began to draw suspicion. The first cracks appeared in the form of labor controversy. Investigative journalists traced Zara's supply chains to factories in Brazil, India, Bangladesh, and Morocco, where workers allegedly faced unsafe conditions, grueling hours, and wages far below legal minimums. In 2011, a Brazilian television report claimed that workers in an Inditex-linked factory were being kept in slave-like conditions. Though Ortega's company insisted these were unauthorized subcontractors and promised corrective action, the headlines were brutal. The once untouchable empire suddenly found itself under siege. Environmental activists joined the chorus, accusing fast fashion giants, Zara included, of producing disposable clothing that fueled massive textile waste and polluted waterways with dyes and chemicals. The term fast fashion shifted from a badge of innovation to a symbol of overconsumption and exploitation. For Ortega personally, the attack struck at the heart of his carefully crafted invisibility. He had always believed that the brand should speak, not the man, but the media wanted answers from the man himself. Why wouldn't the founder of one of the world's most powerful fashion empires face the public when the empire was accused of wrongdoing? Then came the financial shocks. Inditex's profits, while still enormous, began to feel the pressure of shifting consumer behavior. Online retailers like ASOS and Boohoo were outpacing Zara's famously fast turnaround. In China, e-commerce giants like Alibaba's Tmall and Shein were capturing the attention of young shoppers with prices and delivery times even Zara couldn't always beat. The company scrambled to modernize its online presence, but critics wondered if Ortega's old playbook could survive in a digital-first age. Even his family life, long shielded from the public, began attracting attention. His daughter, Marta Ortega, emerged as the likely heir to the empire, but with that came tabloid coverage of her personal relationships, lavish wedding, and fashionable image. Suddenly, Ortega's iron wall of privacy looked less impenetrable. Perhaps most telling was Ortega's own withdrawal from daily leadership. In 2011, he stepped down as chairman of Inditex, handing the role to Pablo Isla. While he remained the company's largest shareholder and still attended key meetings, it was clear he was retreating from the front lines. To some, it was a graceful transition for a man in his 70s. To others, it looked like a strategic retreat in the face of growing scrutiny. The price of fame was also personal. Friends say Ortega hated seeing his name in negative headlines, hated the feeling of being chased by journalists outside his home in Acorua. One former associate described him as a man who built a fortress not of stone, but of silence, and the outside world was starting to pound on the gates. And yet, he never wavered in his refusal to grant televised interviews or respond directly to criticism. His silence became part of the controversy. Was it dignified restraint, or was it avoidance? The question hung over him like a shadow. By the mid-2010 second, Ortega had learned the hard truth of modern power. You can control your factories, your stores, even your global logistics network, but you cannot fully control the narrative once the world decides it wants to know your story. And as his empire faced demands for transparency, Ortega would have to decide whether to adapt or to disappear even further from view. As the spotlight grew hotter on Zara and its parent company Inditex, Amancio Ortega chose a path that was as consistent as it was unexpected. He retreated even deeper into privacy, letting others take the public stage while he remained firmly behind the scenes. After stepping down as chairman in 2011, Ortega handed the reins to Pablo Isla, a seasoned executive known for his pragmatic leadership style. Under Isla, Inditex began addressing some of the criticisms leveled at the fast fashion giant, investing in sustainability initiatives, improving supply chain transparency, and accelerating the company's digital transformation. Yet throughout this period, Ortega's influence remained pervasive. Though no longer involved in daily operations, he retained the largest shareholding and reportedly continued to weigh in on key decisions quietly. Ortega's personal life followed a similar pattern of subtlety. He continued to live mostly in A Corua, shunning the flashy penthouses and sprawling mansions common among billionaires of his stature. His routine was reportedly simple: private family time, discreet philanthropy, and an almost monastic avoidance of media attention. Friends and insiders describe him as a man who values solitude and simplicity above all else, perhaps shaped by a lifetime of rising from humble beginnings. Though the world knew him as the founder of a retail empire, few knew much about his passions outside business. Some reports hinted at a love for sailing along the Galician coast and a preference for quiet dinners over gala events. His family, especially his children, remained fiercely protective of their privacy, resisting public interviews or social media exposure, a clear reflection of Ortega's enduring belief that fame was a distraction from true work. Meanwhile, Inditex's business model began to evolve. The rise of e-commerce forced Zara to rethink its lightning-fast supply chains and physical stores. Ortega's legacy was a company built on speed and control, but the internet demanded agility, transparency, and responsiveness to a new generation of consumers. Inditex invested billions in digital platforms and sustainability goals, vowing to reduce waste and embrace circular fashion. Some saw this as a remarkable reinvention, a phoenix-like rise that honored Ortega's original vision while adapting to the demands of the 21st century. Yet others whispered that these changes also marked the limits of Ortega's influence. Could the man who built an empire on secrecy and speed truly thrive in an era defined by openness and slow fashion movements? Was his gradual fade from the spotlight a signal that the era of the silent billionaire was ending? In 2021, when Marta Ortega, his daughter, was appointed chairwoman of Inditex, many analysts viewed it as the passing of a torch, a chance to modernize the company's culture and global presence. It was also seen as a nod to the family's enduring control and the hope that the next generation would combine Ortega's business acumen with a more visible leadership style. For Amancio Ortega himself, the years after stepping down seemed to be a time of reflection rather than reinvention. The man who once reshaped global fashion chose instead to quietly witness the legacy he built, a legacy marked by billions in wealth, global influence, and a business model that forever changed how the world shops. And though he rarely breaks his silence, the world watches closely, wondering, in a fast-changing world, what will the silent billionaire do next? Amancio Ortega's story isn't just about building a fashion empire, it's also deeply rooted in family, legacy, and the quiet passing of a torch. Though Ortega kept his personal life tightly under wraps, his family has always been a central pillar of his world. Ortega married Rosala Mera, his childhood sweetheart, and together they raised two children, Sandra and Marta. Rosala played an essential role in the early days of Zara, working alongside Amancio to sew, sell, and build their fledgling business. Though they divorced in 1986, they maintained a close relationship until Rosala's death in 2013. Her passing was a blow, but it also highlighted the family's remarkable resilience and dedication to their shared legacy. Of the children, Marta Ortega has emerged as the natural heir to the Inditex empire. Groomed for leadership away from the public eye, Marta spent years learning the business from the ground up, working in stores, understanding customer preferences, and managing operations. In 2021, she was named chairwoman of Inditex, signaling a new chapter for the company and a continuation of Ortega's vision with a fresh perspective. Her rise to the helm was not without media attention. Marta's marriage to Carlos Torretta, a well-known fashion photographer, brought the family into the spotlight more than ever before, though they both remain relatively private. The attention also sparked curiosity about how the Ortega family balances wealth, power, and personal privacy in a world that often demands visibility. Beyond Marta, the Ortega family has diversified their interests. They are known for substantial philanthropic efforts, quietly supporting causes ranging from education to healthcare in Spain. Amancio himself has been linked to donations for public hospitals and cultural institutions, though he shuns public acknowledgement. The family's foundation operates discreetly, a reflection of their values' impact without ostentation. Inditex, meanwhile, continues to expand under the guidance of Marta and the leadership team, moving aggressively into digital retail and sustainability initiatives. This strategy reflects a blend of the old and new, preserving Amancio's fast fashion roots while adapting to a generation that demands ethical business practices. Still, questions remain. Will the next generation maintain the same iron grip on the empire, or will Inditex eventually open up ownership to external investors or diversify beyond family control? For now, it seems the Ortega legacy is firmly in family hands, with Marta leading the charge. The story of Amancio Ortega is thus not just about a man who built a fortune, but about a family that has quietly stewarded it across decades, preserving both power and privacy in equal measure. Amancio Ortega's legacy is woven into the very fabric of the modern fashion industry. He didn't just build a company, he revolutionized how clothing is designed, produced, and sold worldwide. The ripple effects of his innovations continue to be felt decades after he first opened that small Zara store in A Coruña. Before Ortega, fashion was largely a slow, seasonal business governed by tradition and exclusivity. Designers created collections months in advance, retailers stocked inventory based on forecasts, and customers waited patiently for the next big trend to arrive. Ortega shattered this model with his relentless focus on speed, responsiveness, and affordability. Zara and Inditex introduced a vertical integration approach, controlling almost every step of the production and retail process. This allowed them to compress timelines from months to mere weeks, making Zara the master of fast fashion, a term that was scarcely used before Ortega's rise. His model empowered shoppers to access the latest styles as soon as they appeared on runways or street corners, fundamentally changing consumer expectations. Yet, Ortega's impact goes beyond business efficiency. He democratized fashion, bringing runway-inspired looks to the masses at accessible prices. This shift transformed millions of people's wardrobes worldwide and reshaped entire economies, creating jobs not just in Spain, but across global supply chains. At the same time, his story serves as a cautionary tale. The environmental and social consequences of fast fashion, textile waste, exploitative labor practices, and the relentless churn of cheap clothing are directly linked to the model Ortega pioneered. As public consciousness grows, many question whether this legacy can be sustained in a more ethical future. Academics and industry experts have debated Ortega's place in history. Some praise him as a visionary genius who read the pulse of the modern consumer and rewrote the rules. Others criticize the darker side of his empire's growth. What remains indisputable is that he forced the industry to confront the tension between profit, speed, and responsibility. Today, business schools study Inditex's supply chain as a textbook example of operational excellence. Several universities and fashion institutes have established programs inspired by Ortega's work, teaching new generations how to balance innovation with sustainability. Public opinion on Ortega is mixed but respectful. He is seen as an icon of Spanish entrepreneurship, a man who rose from modest means to global prominence without sacrificing humility or privacy. His story inspires countless entrepreneurs who dream of transforming industries through ingenuity and grit. In the end, Amancio Ortega's legacy is a mirror of modern capitalism itself, full of brilliance and contradictions, innovation and consequences. His empire reshaped the world of fashion forever, leaving a mark that is impossible to erase. Amancio Ortega's journey from a modest shop assistant in Galicia to the founder of the world's largest fashion empire is nothing short of legendary. Yet, unlike many billionaires who seek the spotlight, Ortega built his fortune in near-complete silence, crafting an empire that revolutionized fashion while remaining largely invisible to the public eye. His story teaches us that true power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Through relentless focus, innovation, and control, Ortega reshaped an entire industry, proving that speed and adaptability could outmatch tradition and exclusivity. But his legacy also forces us to confront difficult questions about the price of fast success, the environmental toll, labor issues, and the very culture of consumption that fast fashion encourages. As Ortega steps back, handing the baton to a new generation, the world watches with both admiration and skepticism. Will Inditex evolve into a force for sustainable fashion? Can it balance profit with responsibility? And can the silent billionaires model survive in a world that demands transparency and ethics? One thing is clear. Amancio Ortega changed the rules of the game forever. His life is a testament to ambition, humility, and the complexity of modern capitalism. Whether as an inspirational titan or a cautionary figure, his impact is undeniable. If you found this story eye-opening, subscribe and stay tuned for more hidden truths from the world's richest.